In 2009, Avatar arrived on the big screen, and for better or worse, it changed the theater dynamic for the better part of a decade, ushering in a new age of 3D films. Now, I say for better or worse because some of these films were authentically filmed with that format in mind, utilizing specially built cameras and sequences designed to take advantage of the new technology. Now, some movies like How to Train Your Dragon made great work of it, but unfortunately, most movies did not, and they tried to cash in on the craze by introducing lazily post-converted 3D, where everyone looks stacked up like some freakish pop-up book. Now, these cash grabs quickly killed the trend and made audiences lose faith in the technology. Personally, I don't think I've seen a 3D movie in like 5 years. But if we're all being really honest, nobody really recaptured that same 3D experience as Avatar. And it's become really easy to be cynical about that first film and forget how immersive it really was when it first came out. And I'm saying that as someone who was very so-so on the first movie, even back in 2009. Now the effects, the world, the 3D, they were all really the star of the show. But the characters and plot? Not so much. And I'm not going to sit here and rehash the same points that a lot of people have about it being Fern Gully or Dances with Wolves or Pocahontas in space. Okay, everyone's already said that to death. But after 10 years, Cameron is finally returning to this world that started this trend. And there's reasons to be excited about that. He is known as kind of the king of sequels for a reason, and that's thanks to mostly successes like Aliens and Terminator 2. He always seems to know how to up the ante, but the question is, can he go beyond just making the technology and spectacle bigger? Can he actually, solve some of the weaker aspects of that first original movie? And that's what we're going to find out here in this episode of Modern Movies. In Avatar: The Way of Water, we're reunited with our two cat people protagonists, Jake Sully and Neytiri, as their new family life is again disrupted by the return of the Earth invaders that they call Sky People, who are sending out a special ops like Avatar team led by Jake's old nemesis, the Colonel, who has somehow returned from the grave. I guess I won't spoil that for you, but you'll find out pretty quick. It's in the first opening minutes. Their mission is one of revenge and to break the resistance of the local population. With their family being targeted, Jake has no choice but to kind of upend their life and move from their home in the forest to an ocean-dwelling nation where they must now learn the ways of the people while avoiding discovery from the special ops team that is after them. So again, this plot is pretty straightforward. There's returning elements such as exploring new parts of the world and Jake and his family having to learn the ways of a new culture, but it has the benefit still of not being this ripoff of an already done-to-death story. And even though it is simplistic, it does allow for at least some surprises and unique turns without those really, really familiar beats dragging it down and making it go, okay, I know where it's going. All right, let's just get to it. Look, there's no denying that the effects are the main star, but I'm not entirely sure if that's a negative thing. In a way, it reminds me of watching something like Planet Earth. You can kind of just watch the visuals and get lost in the world that's being presented to you. At times, this film even seems to want you to feel that way, with long scenes of, I guess, nothing but taking in the scenery and admiring the whales and the fish. These are also the rare times where it justifies its 48 frames per second, with wide nature shots or images of the animals looking as if they jumped right out of a nature documentary. Unfortunately, the high frame rate, to me, it's still a massive problem overall. And I'm going to admit that I worked hard not to see this in high frame rate. I have never liked this creative choice because it makes movies look cheap, like they were shot on a camcorder, and it creates this distractingly annoying frame jitter. And a lot of that is due to the fact that without the 24 frames per second, you have no motion blur. And it just doesn't smooth stuff out naturally. Unfortunately, despite the fact I went out of my way to look for a 24 frames per second showing, I still somehow ended up in a high frame rate showing. And I'm going to be completely honest, it very nearly wrecked the experience for me. In the first, at least 20 minutes, I was actually thinking about walking out just so I could come back at a normal showing without it. And the reason I disliked it was in the action scenes, it really resulted in everything looking like a video game cutscene. And yes, you can find normal 24 frames per second showings. But Cameron, by his own admission, said he meant for this film to be viewed in this format. And I gotta take that into consideration here and maybe take some points off for that, especially since the entire movie wasn't even shot in this format. Most of it is post-converted, with frames duplicated because theaters aren't equipped for the intermittent HFR. In my opinions, directors need to stop pushing this. Why would you take something that is so beautiful and technologically a marvel and just kneecap it with this hacky post-converted ugly creative choice. It's a waste. It's such a waste. I do not get it. That out of the way. Even if it was annoying to me, it didn't completely take away from the gorgeous look of this film. These 3D sequences are stunning. Underwater has never looked better, and the 3D really makes it feel immersive in a way that even flying sequences really can't match. But here in these underwater segments, you got people moving kind of in and out of space in this cool three-dimensional way with bubbles and fish actually giving depth to this space. There really hasn't been anything like it before. And it makes the underwater sequences of other movies like, say, Aquaman or Wakanda Forever look just quaint by comparison. But let's be honest here. You're not listening to me or anyone else to hear how good the visuals are. You already knew they'd be stunning. You wanted to know if the story and characters were good enough to keep you invested through a 3-hour-plus runtime. And the answer is, yeah, I think so. Now, don't get me wrong. That 3-hour runtime is insanely bloated. It just doesn't justify that length. A lot of it feels like Cameron's kind of excessively splashing around in water, but the film does go the extra distance and make some headway in the story, action, and character department. Jake Sully in the last movie was kind of just like this big dummy that seemed to just bumble his way into being a great white savior for this tribe. And there wasn't much to him, and you couldn't figure out why everyone found him so compelling because he seemed kind of like an idiot, but hey, it worked out for him, I guess. In this movie, however, he serves more of the role of a devoted father who is just trying to do right by his family. Now, that may not seem that deep either, and it's not, but it's better than what we were given before. Unfortunately, his wife Neytiri from the first film, she's kind of reduced in her role. I actually found her to be the best character in the original film, as shallow praise as that may be. But here, Zoe Saldana is given very little to do except play the role of this doting wife. She is sort of sidelined until the third act of the movie, where suddenly she comes alive again, and you remember how great Saldana originally was in this role. What makes this movie step up its game in the character department is actually mostly the children in the movie. And this movie, surprisingly, I think, focuses a lot more on them than it does the original characters. And yes, most of them are archetypes, but most of them work just simply by being more likable and certainly more enjoyable to spend time with than somebody like boring Jake Sully or, frankly, anyone from the original film. But who are these new characters? You have Sigourney Weaver returning as Jake and Neytiri's adoptive daughter, and she's kind of like the weird, artsy sibling. There's a mystery with her, and this is frustratingly not resolved within the actual film, and they're saving it probably for a sequel. But her spirituality and mysticism are used in interesting ways that don't feel like the same cheap Deus Ex Machina that they had at the end of the first film. And Sigourney Weaver does a good job of playing a teen girl, even if her voice sometimes sounds a little too old and mature. And I think the most interesting character probably is the middle child. Loak, I think is his name. He's probably the closest you'll get to a main character, despite actor Britton Dalton. He's really far down the billing, even though he may have actually the most screen time. Loak suffers the middle child syndrome and struggles to fit in his new home and meet the expectations of his parents, especially when he's facing constant comparisons to his older brother, who is, ironically, probably the least interesting of the bunch. And then there's Spider, a human kid that's raised by the Na'vi, or like half raised by the Na'vi, and he has this kind of Tarzan complex going on. And it creates interesting dynamics when he finds himself kind of pulled by characters who are on both sides. And I think the reason these kids work for me is because it plays into really familiar ideas, like a family that has to leave their old home and move to a new town. This creates the conflicts of the parents having to adapt to their new culture, new jobs, that sort of stuff, while the kids have to struggle with fitting in, their first crushes, dealing with bullies. Now that I think about it, it's kind of like Fabelmans if Spielberg was a blue cat person. Great! And sometimes this family dynamic can feel too human. And maybe that's because Jake is, or was, a human and is now head of the house? No, still weird. Weird. Yeah, especially when you have the kids going around just acting like normal neighborhood children, even using like human slang. And the movie uses the old gimmick of, I'm hearing English in my head, because we don't want you, as the audience, to have to read subtitles. And I thought this was kind of a cheat and didn't really trust the audiences like, say, Planet of the Apes did. That movie did a good job of taking English and mixing it with sign language to great effect. They could have done something like that here, especially given the family members are all bilingual. You could have had a good mix of English and their native fake language, whatever it's called, Pandernese. Is that it? I don't know. And personally, I think the villain's also a lot of fun. The Colonel, that's what I call him because I don't remember what his actual name is. Anyways, the Colonel is still the same over-the-top cartoon character like he was in the first film, but now that he's in this Navi form, Navi, well, I always say Navi. Anyways, he's still a cartoon dirtbag, but he's a more interesting and entertaining one, I'll say. But next to the great and stunning visuals, the other big winner of this film has to be the action. This film is much heavier on the action than the first film, but where that one was interested in like these big epic battles, this one is smaller and more intimate for the characters. And for me, this makes the action sequences a lot more intense and gripping because it focuses more on those personal stakes. And the third act goes all out. Cameron really just kind of cuts loose in a way we haven't seen from him in a very long time. And this is some of his best action stuff since T2 or Aliens, with maybe a dash of, Titanic thrown in there. And I think that's saying a lot. And despite those third act pacing issues, I think the third act does make sure to deliver in a big way. Overall, despite the frustrating frame rate issues I had, I found this film way more enjoyable than the first. The action is more intense, the characters more likable, and it isn't burdened by an overly predictable plot template. Cameron expands on the world and stunning technology in satisfying ways by making a true theatrical experience that you have to see on the big screen. Because frankly, the 2D small screen experience that you'll see on Disney Plus when it comes out in 45 days, that's never going to compare. And I got to have respect for that. And I think that's it for my review of Avatar: The Way of Water. So we'll see what he comes up with next for his third film, but for me, I thought this was an enjoyable return to Pandora. So if you liked this review, please like and subscribe. We are going back to film history again with our next review. We got Tilly's Punctured Romance coming up, and we have, what's the other one? Tess of the Storm Country. Yes. So if you want to check out those, be sure to tune in. Thank you. Keep those wheels turning.